Okay, we are live.
Cool. Okay, so hi everyone and welcome to the Product People Meetup. We have the lovely Milly Schmidt. Have I said your surname correctly?
You got it. That's it.
Yay. We've got, the lovely Milly with us today, so we will move on to that very shortly. A little bit about myself. So I work with product people. I've got 10 plus years in product and leadership roles, and currently work with a couple of clients here in Berlin. At Product People, we do a couple of things. So we help companies discover and deliver great products faster. We empower our product community to share knowledge generously through meetups such as this. And through our engagements, we also do all the hands-on and unglamorous work of a product manager, anywhere from 3 to 36 months. And our community is now 6K members and growing. So thank you for being a big part of that. Typically, we step in for some particular reasons. It's usually that the product team is growing, someone's gone on parental leave, for example, someone's left and you have a gap to fill and the hiring process is taking a longer time, or they need more coverage to help bridge that gap. Other times they're building out a new product line or a product feature and they need someone to step in, or simply need help with coaching or something like that in helping to appraise the product team and get them to the next level of awesomeness. This is our team. We're fully distributed across the world. We're headquartered in Berlin in Germany, but we're spread across many corners of the earth. And we've got Mansour sitting there in Cyprus. I think Joanne is in Spain. So we're all over the place. Our clients range from startups through to big corporates and large tech companies like Zalando, Scout24, and TIA. We are actually hiring as well, and I think UsabilityHub are as well. So if you're interested in product management, please get in touch. We're at productpeople.join.com, and I'm sure Milly will tell you what they're looking for also. So to move on to the special guests, we have Milly, who's the Director of Product at UsabilityHub. Today we have like a fireside chat format for the first time. So we're going to do less presentation and more conversation. So you're welcome to pitch in your questions throughout, and we'll have time for a Q&A and some catch up at the end. So feel free to drop your comments or questions on Zoom or LinkedIn or YouTube if you're on one of those platforms. So Milly, a big welcome. Milly is from a SaaS company based in Melbourne. Milly is the Director of Product. She leads the product function and strategy, including product management, design, and research. And UsabilityHub builds a product that helps people do remote UX research, and the mission is to make UX research more accessible by making it faster, easier, and more affordable. It's been around for 10 plus years, and at the moment in a growth phase with a multitude of new hires, ambitious product goals, and a strong, talented team. The challenge of leading this team through growth is exciting and rewarding, and where Milly's focus has been for the past few years. So Milly, with your background spans multiple disciplines, starting in the arts with writing and editing through to tech, engineering and design, and now you're firmly in product and strategic executive leadership. Can you tell us a bit about your journey and how you landed in product?
Thanks for the intro. Yes. So yeah, I have a really diverse background, as I think a lot of people in product tend to have. You can't really quite yet kind of out of high school decide to be a product manager and then go to uni and then end up with your dream job. I think it's the kind of role you end up coming at from a different angle. I actually didn't really know what I was going to do when I was younger, and I was told by my school and education that I was just creative, and so I was like, oh, I'll do something creative, and I decided to go into writing, which I'm fairly good at. which led me into editing. And I liked it, but it was, being an editor for a commercial magazine is actually a pretty hard job, and also doesn't pay a huge amount of money. And I found it very, very stressful. But it did start to teach me about some things that I thought were interesting, and things that I hadn't realized kind of before, which was essentially like the business and commercial pressures that interplayed with like creative output when you were putting together something like a magazine. And also the importance of the web, which this would have been like around 2008-ish, 2009. And things were really starting to kick off in that space. And so my first serious job was actually really running the whole web presence for a publishing company, one website in particular for like the magazine that I was focused on, but also related ones. And that was like very interesting to me. I'd worked in some web kind of publishing places before, but it was a real opportunity to take ownership of it and drive kind of what needed to be built and how it was going to be designed, and working with the web team. And I was really leading the whole project. And then I kind of took a jump out of there and went and actually worked at the tech team that was building the website. I left the publishing world and jumped into the tech world there. And then I was essentially working as an engineer, but like in a small company with a lot of hats. And I eventually skilled up on UX design, which I thought was going to be my kind of sweet spot for a long time, and it was. But eventually realized that I kind of had lots and lots of questions that I couldn't answer within the boundaries of that role, and went looking for where the answers were. And for me, that was kind of going further up the decision chain towards where like the decisions I was interested in were being made. And that's how I ended up kind of towards leadership and product. So at the moment I am in a really good position for me, which combines a lot of my different skills and my interest in all those different spaces and experience in those different roles, because I get to kind of run a cross-functional team that does all of those different things. So it works out really well for me. And I think one of the benefits of just having stayed in the tech space for as long as I have is that I've worked at lots of different companies with different teams of different makeups and different kind of strategies. I can kind of compare and contrast those, which I think is a really important skill for a leader to have.
For sure. Yeah, it's good to have that breadth of experience in the different domains, and then so when you're leading and managing those groups of people, you really kind of understand and I guess have that empathy for their role as well.
Yeah.
And we've seen this is like a super common thing that people move from other disciplines. So like you said, UX or design, engineering, we hear it from people quite often, and they want to move into product. Why do you think that product is such an attractive space or role for people to play?
Yeah, I think for different people, it might be different reasons. But I think one of the biggest reasons why people come to product is it's really feels like you're bridging that gap between kind of the business and the delivery. And I think that's interesting for certain personalities who kind of speak both languages. I kind of think of myself as bilingual sometimes, like I can speak business and I can also speak technical. But also I think it is the proximity to where decisions are being made. And I think if you're the kind of person who is really passionate about impact, you might go looking in your career for like, where can you contribute to the most impactful decisions? And for me, those decisions are things like, where are we focusing on, from a strategic level, and how are we structuring the teams, and how are we working together? And those are the problems that I became increasingly interested in solving. And I think that's because I was starting to realize that as much as I enjoyed designing, like what should it look like or how should it work, my curiosity was taking me to those higher level kind of problems. And I think that's where product roles like attract certain people with that kind of similar curiosity.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I would say I definitely fit that profile. I think of just liking all the the spectrum of things that you get to do and collaborate with. So in that context, I know Usability Hub are growing and you are also hiring product managers, I see. What we get asked a lot, like, what do hiring people look for in a product manager? What are the skills you need? What would be your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's kind of a few different, as you know, like a few different flavors of product manager. You know, it plays out differently in different teams and for different organizations with different needs. At the moment, I'm really interested in a really kind of consultative, facilitatory kind of product manager, someone who can work with stakeholders really well, including the actual product team, you know, who are delivering the work themselves, and kind of defer to the subject matter experts within the team and kind of create the value out of extracting it from the people who we already have. The other thing that we really care about is really strong passion for customers, really passion for delivering customer value and really deeply understanding customer needs. Those are that's something we hire for across the board, but I think for a product manager specifically, that's definitely a really big one. And I guess the other things I would say is just curiosity. Like, I think for any role in this kind of position, like being able to come to every kind of situation, but like especially, you know, product management problems that are frequently like about differing opinions or differing priorities. I think curiosity is a really important value to bring to the table, to come at every situation with, I want to understand. And that's something I'll be like specifically looking forward to meeting people who have that, because I think people like that are, I think, also just like a delight to work with. You know, I think if you come to work with a sense of curiosity, you tend to be really have a lot of skills with managing conflict and managing stakeholders really, really efficiently as well.
Sure, makes sense. So I guess over to Usability Hub specifically. So this is a tool to validate your ideas, your messaging, your features, that kind of thing. Can you tell us more about how it's used in a product context? And do you have any examples for us that you could share?
Yeah, happily. So yeah, Usability Hub is a tool that you may think is just for usability testing, given the name, obviously, but it can be used by many different people. And we do see it used by lots of different people, from designers through to product people, product managers, through to marketers, entrepreneurs, people kind of, yeah, like you said, out there validating business ideas. We offer basically a set of tools that you can use, and you can pair that with this panel. So the panel is a good thing to explain first. There's 350,000 people, Billy can get me the exact number, on our panel, who are all around the globe, and they're all available to you to give you feedback on different things. You can also send it out to your own audience. So if you have like your own user testing participant pool, or you want to, you know, send it out on social media, you can grab a link and do it that way as well. And then what you can do is send them out various different things. So some of them are very design focused. For example, like a first click test, you can send someone an image of a page and ask them where they would click. So you can test whether your call to action button is strong enough, or whether people understand like what you're asking them to do. Or something like a preference test, you can compare two different versions of a design and ask someone a question about which one they think is more appropriate. So those ones are very design focused, but there's also some that I think can be used in, yeah, your more kind of early stages, including the fact that we just have a survey capability. So you can do some really interesting things just with a survey, as you know. But what's interesting is you can combine these methods together. So you can have a survey, and then you can show them a click test, and then you can show them a 5-second test. And you can weave those together in a way that allows you to really go quite deep on some concepts. I think the 5-second test is a particularly interesting one, because it can really test whether you've captured your unique value proposition effectively. which can be just really useful when you're in that refinement stage of, maybe just putting up a landing page to see if you can get interest in a new idea or something like that. So for example, if you're doing really lean product research at the start of a project before you've kind of got the show on the road, you might make a landing page but not have a product and send out a bunch of ads and then send them to the landing page and just see if you can get interest. That's a really great way of validating a product idea, but it's not going to work if your landing page isn't very good. So you could get the ads out there and send them to the landing page, but if your landing page is poorly designed, that's going to be a failing strategy. So it's really easy for you to put that design up on UsabilityHub and just check that it makes sense. You've communicated it clearly. The call to action is easy and people know like what they're supposed to do. So it's really helpful in that kind of early evaluation as well. We see people use it for things like social media as well, like testing that your Instagram ad is useful or testing that your whatever ad kind of that you put out there is useful. And we see, people using it all the way through to like understanding whether an existing interface in a product is working well and kind of benchmarking the existing usage and then maybe doing some iterations on top of that and see how the changes perform. So there's lots of different ways that it can be leveraged by different parts of the team. But I really like the idea of, for product managers especially, evaluating ideas when you're in that kind of early testing stages and also benchmarking existing experiences to try and understand what the opportunities are for improvement. In terms of examples, I was kind of we sometimes work with some of our customers if they want some research advice. I'm happy to jump on a call and help them out. And I worked with a customer who was actually testing a new, it's a really interesting example, testing a new packaging design for a chocolate bar. And they wanted to check if, because there was a chocolate bar that had like guarana in it, like energy stuff.
Interesting.
And they wanted to check if people thought it had caffeine in it, because it didn't, and make sure that like they weren't getting the wrong messaging from the wrapping. So just testing the design of the packaging. But as always, there are constraints. And this particular client had a constraint where they didn't really want to include like their brand on it. So they wanted to include the concept really of the packaging design without giving away like who they were, which was kind of tricky. So they sent us the mock-ups and, I was kind of trying to figure out what we should do. What I ended up doing, and this is always something that I would recommend if you get in a pickle like this, we stepped back and we thought, what is the critical information that we're trying to test here? And we ended up essentially like tracing the wrapping paper and creating like a sketch of it. So without using like their colors and their brand, we were able to kind of draw like what is essentially like a lo-fi version of their wrapping. And they sent that out and we were able to get the evaluation that they wanted from the panel, which was a really interesting exercise. And they hadn't actually thought of doing it that way. So it was cool. I think it's very unusual for me to be working in like the physical product space in that way, but it was good to see that the techniques kind of translated.
Cool. And do you see that very often that people want to do unbranded tests? I know some big brands that do that for brand safety, but do you see that very often?
Yeah, there's a few reasons why you might want to do it. I do get it. I've actually done it myself. One of the reasons that I think is a really good reason to do an unbranded test is if you're maybe you're an existing product company, you've got existing things out in market and you're launching something new, but you don't want to, you're worried that the association with your current brand might have an impact on the research. So for example, if I'm like, the situation in which I did this was I was working at a company that was working in like investment advice really, and they wanted to put out, we were testing the idea of maybe creating like a chat bot or something that could give people advice. we wanted to test whether the chatbot itself was the right medium for the audience without necessarily thinking whether it would be right for our brand, because we could actually launch it under a different brand eventually. And we didn't want the research to be like, oh, the chatbots are cool, but not for you. We just wanted to get a sense of like whether chatbots would be right for that particular thing that we were trying to use them for, which was like give advice about money. So sometimes you do want to like be able to disambiguate like your brand from the brand of the concept that you're testing. Brand security obviously is a big one for a lot of people, but I think there's strategic reasons why you might want to do it as well. It's something that you can do, and actually like there's in our platform you don't have to include your branding, like unless it's in your actual imagery. There's no kind of sense of who is sending out the test. And you know, again, going lo-fi is a useful way to do that. Sometimes we see people put out essentially mock-ups that just like they've removed their brand from it because they're really just testing the kind of bare bones of the concept without getting the brand association involved in the user's responses.
Yeah, makes sense. So I guess you professionally, and I know that you have this personal curiosity with like really good design and good customer experience and that kind of stuff. What's an example that you've seen go really wrong, like that you think is just a really poorly thought out product or feature?
Thought out.
And or the other end of the spectrum.
How do I do this without being mean?
Unbranded comments. You don't have to mention the brand. Or if you want it to be nice, it's public, you can say the other end, that what's someone that you think has got it right and done a really good job.
I'm a very skeptical product person, I have to say. Like, I'm not a huge fan of things in the way that other people are. I really, one of the products that I use mainly day to day, I guess one of the biggest ones that I really like is I use Google Home a lot. But I would say it's like a bit of a mixed review from me, because I think Google Home is a really great concept. And I think there's a lot about it to really like. I find it when it works really well. I can turn the lights off in my house and I can close the blinds with my voice. Like, I think it's very exciting. However, one thing that really disappoints me about it, aside from like people's concerns about privacy, which I won't touch right now, is I just haven't seen very many features. Like, I'm very surprised every time that it can't do more, because I feel like that's kind of the promise of it, was they were going to like integrate it with all these different things and it was going to get better at learning how to do stuff, and none of that has actually happened. So it's an interesting one, because it's not a bad product, but in some way it's kind of disappointed me because it hasn't met my expectations in terms of like what I thought it was going to be over time. I thought it was going to get better and there would be more features, but that really hasn't happened. So it's kind of a bit of both. Like, I really like it in some ways, and it's also disappointed me in others.
It's true, it hasn't evolved that much in the last 3 or 4 years, or however long it's been sort of in market. Yeah, I've not considered that, but yeah, Google Home and like Alexa and stuff, yeah, they've all kind of stayed fairly stagnant.
Yeah, and they can do stuff that I don't care about as well. Like, they can tell me a really bad joke and I'm like, yeah, I don't want that.
Not critical to my day. Yeah,
really not.
Okay, so I mean, on that, like, do you see that there's a common mistake that many either product managers or products or that make, that you see occurring time and time again?
It's a very big question. Do I see a common mistake that product managers make? I don't know if there's anything comes to mind. I'd be curious to see if you have a thought on that one, given that you work, in the space more with lots of different companies and different product managers.
Yeah, I think more in general, there's always just that customer validation piece in general that people don't actually consider the end customer, and they just build things because they think that they like it. Or yeah, I've seen CEOs of startups build whole companies without actually checking if there's a a need, or like, are they actually solving a problem and that kind of thing. So that's probably the most common thing I've seen. Yeah, I don't know if that comes through on your end as well from a usability perspective. I
it's
guess
an
that's
interesting
what your whole
one.
business is about, is validating.
Yeah, look,
So.
I think that obviously happens, and it's probably the one thing that I try to get people to not do. Like, make sure you go and check and ask, and validate the need before you go about solving the problem. But maybe I've been lucky to work with a lot of product managers that are quite good, because I haven't seen too many trundle down that path, and a lot of them tend to be advocates for research and validation as much as I am.
It's good.
I think maybe one skill that I think is really critical, and maybe isn't as kind of popular as some of the other ones that I would love to see more people get really good at, is facilitation. And just, being, I think a product manager is the kind of role where if you can run an amazing workshop, or even like conduct a really good meeting, I think facilitation is a kind of overlooked skill, where I think people can take it for granted that it's just a thing that everyone can do. And actually, it's a very specific skill set that I think you need to kind of go and potentially get training on and get good at. And there are particular kind of tools that you can have in your facilitation toolkit that can make things really make or break things. So I think I wouldn't say it's like a mistake I see people make. It's more like a common weakness that I wish people would get a little stronger at sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, I'll close out with one last question on my end, and then Mansoor will facilitate the Q&A and the breakout. I think something that we like to ask everyone is, what's your go-to resources or things that you just think everyone should read or listen to?
Yeah, there are a few, but I will say that I'm kind of at the point in my journey where I'm not really as deeply kind of active in that as I used to be. I'm doing a lot more kind of I guess work that's a little bit separate to the hard skills. My focus at the moment is really in like adult development and coaching. And I am really interested in a book called, what is it called? The author, her name is Jennifer Garvey Berger, and the book is called Changing on the Job. And it's just about leadership and working with people at different skill levels, which I think is super interesting for anyone who is kind of in these kind of positions. The other person who I really follow and I find really interesting and has some really compelling views is John Cutler, who works at Amplitude. And his kind of views on product, I think back to that point before about curiosity, he's a very curious person, and he kind of comes at problems with a mindset of trying to understand them. And he has a real sense of being able to consider kind of multiple ways. I'm very interested in this idea that there's no one true way of doing things, and I think he kind of embodies that quite well. So his work is really interesting. Other than that, yeah, I probably look to a very diverse kind of places for my learning now that are a bit less close to the kind of exact product management path.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome recommendations. I'm sure we'll share those afterwards with the community. But thank you so much for joining us in your afternoon there. And I'll hand over to Mansoor, and Mansoor will lead the Q&A. So feel free to drop your questions on whatever platform you're on, and we'll shoot those to Milly, and we can also have a breakout and some networking.
Thanks, Chloe.
Thanks. Over to you, Mansoor.
Thanks, Chloe. So everyone, we're open for questions. If you'd like to share them, and you can relate them to Milly, which would answer them. But meanwhile, Milly, I have a question. Because we've been discussing this with Chloe before we started the call. So I heard you were supporting a lot of activities outside of your work and outside of your scope, well, not of your scope of work, but in some different maybe organizations or communities, I would say. So I'm talking about Chloe mentioned Interaction Design Association or Code Like a Girl and a few others, but I didn't memorize everything. So what would you say, like, how do you find this important in the terms of sharing knowledge and, mingling and networking within communities, be it in a, like in a very similar thing for your job or slightly maybe diverse sometimes?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I want to recognize as well that not everyone has time to do stuff outside of work. Actually, at the moment, I don't really have time to do stuff outside of work. But there have been points in my career where it made a lot of sense for me and for my lifestyle as well. So I did go through quite a few years where I preferred to actually work fewer days full time, do kind of 3 or 4 days, and then have other days for other things, whether that was community or my own projects or whatever I was working on. And that was a really good opportunity for me to get involved with different groups. I think it's really, it was really useful for me personally for a couple of reasons. And this happens to people, it's very common, but I didn't always have a tribe at work. I didn't always feel like I had, people who had the same interests as me or could potentially support my learning in the way that I wanted. I'm a pretty ambitious learner. I'm always really interested in kind of what's next for me. And, your workplace isn't always going to have that. So I kind of looked to the community for mentorship, but also for some validation that, the things that I was interested in were relevant and important, where maybe I was missing that from my workplace. And I also, really wanted to, I've always been really driven by impact. And sometimes when, you're at work and you don't feel like you're having impact, you don't feel like you're being able to kind of influence, it's nice to find other ways to do that. It kind of takes the pressure off work a little bit from being your everything. And so for me, Code Like a Girl was a really useful thing for me to get involved in because I really felt like I was kind of having impact and I was making a meaningful contribution to something that I really cared about, which was getting more women and keeping more women in the tech space. So yeah, for me, those were the kind of personal drivers. In terms of should other people do it? My first thing would be is it right for you? And do you actually have time to do it? Because I think there is almost an expectation that people get involved in community stuff and that if you don't do it, then you're not as good or whatever. I think, I want to be very sensitive to the fact that if you've got kids or if you've got, other things going on in your life, you can't necessarily get as involved with that stuff. And I think that is totally fine. And also there's lots of other things that you might want to do outside of work, like go and join a sports team, whatever else you feel like doing that is also very valuable. And potentially you could learn a lot from doing that you could apply to your work. But look, networking is super important. And I've gotten a lot of my jobs from networking. And I think, obviously personally that's been helpful, but I want to be that person for someone else. And I think for someone who is curious about maybe shifting into a different space or is looking for their next opportunity, being out there and meeting people is a great way to do that. As well as, I think not everyone learns in the same way. I've kind of given this advice to people before, but some people might be totally happy to read a book or do an online course or go to uni or whatever you want to do in order to learn something. Some people actually just want to go out and have conversations and meet people and learn from real world experience. And I think doing community events is a really, attending them and even participating in them is a really good way to do that. And that's, really important to have that open for people who learn in that way as well.
Well, thank you. And yeah, that's a very nice way to put it. Then I have another question coming from me. So I wanted to ask you about, how you see things when it comes to the whole product management role let's say, in itself, because we talked also a little bit about this, saying that, you know, you don't have necessarily to come from a very specific background, and maybe education wise, no one, I mean, it's not institutionalized. We don't have product managers, you know, freshly graduated and ready to take on the job. So do you think this would change anytime soon, or not only on the preparation side, but also on the evolution of the role itself? Would it be affiliated or attached to another role or to other specific skills or stuff like that?
Yeah, I think it is changing. When I worked at the university here, they were already looking at product management grad certs, like graduate certificates, tertiary qualifications, basically. And they are kind of pulling together resources from different courses and pulling them under a new banner, which they're focusing on product management. So I think the kind of certification side of it is evolving, and you will start to see a little bit more in that space. I think the other thing that you probably will start to see with product management is, in the same way that it's happened with design, the term product manager is starting to get like very overloaded semantically. Like there's a lot of different roles that it kind of encompasses. It means different things to different people. You know, and you know, as a lot of people I think have already experienced the kind of integration of agile into product management. Like, can you be a waterfall product manager? Like, how does it relate to like the Scrum Master role? Like, I think we'll start to see an evolution in the words that we use to talk about these things soon. And I guess the other thing that's probably important and interesting to note is that there's increasingly more kind of product roles in the C-suite. So seeing how it like gets chief product officer and chief experience officer and things like that, I think that is probably a shift that we'll start to see more of, even in non-product specific companies, and see more of the kind of weighting of it towards the business side. But then, yeah, it doesn't make sense for that person to necessarily be like the delivery manager. So I think we'll start to see like more kind of specific versions of the roles come out over time.
All right, thank you. Mirella, you had your hand raised.
Yes, I wanted to second what Milly said. We've also noticed in more mature product companies, they're also separating these roles. So we've seen at companies over 500 or more people, they would have PMs, they would have product operation managers, they would have project managers for short-term things, especially when it requires cross-country coordination or a certain big important launch. In other companies, we've seen program portfolio management or PMO office. And all of these roles operate and start having a slice of like in other small companies or less sophisticated setups are just one person.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is the operational side as well, like product ops, I think is another thing that's probably coming up out of that as well.
Yes, and we've helped already one client with that insight, as we were brought in for PM, and then we said, well, if we do just that, then no one is going to have time to do actual product. So perhaps you want to separate these roles and have a POM, the operational part, considering they're operating in over 100 different physical locations, all of them with their own regulatory setups and demands that are all incoming at certain times to the PM. And it's quite a lot for just one person.
Totally. And I mean, even in our setup, it's a small team. We'll have one product manager, really. I'm already starting to think, if we have 2 Scrum teams, 1 product manager, I'm kind of expecting them to do Scrum Master duties as well, plus, you know, handle a lot of incoming feedback from customers, join up with researchers. Like, that's already a very big role. And we're a small team. So you can imagine how in larger teams, you can have multiple product managers, but even, you know, there's more kind of facets of the role that are probably going to start splitting out into those specializations.
True, and the delivery side of it, we've seen in some companies, it goes back to the engineering manager or a separate role. I generally don't agree much with it being on the PM, because I think this is the responsibility of the delivery team. But we did have clients who asked us to cater to that directly, especially smaller companies who struggled to get their pace going, or there were different setups where something had gone wrong before, and then the new PM needed to solve everything, and that new PM was us.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Okay, so any other questions? People on the call, feel free to raise your hands or just open your mic and shoot away. Okay, I don't think anyone has any question. Wow, looks like we covered everything. No, but I mean, if there are no more questions, maybe we can turn off the live streaming and do some networking, get to know each other a little better. So thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for the ones watching on YouTube. I'll also be sending you a link, so whoever wants to join here on Zoom for the networking can do so. And then whoever wants to join also, we're gonna stop the live streaming, so you can also feel free to turn on your cameras. So first of all, let me send the link here. Here we go.